and we're going to be talking about the priesthood. Before we get into that, though, as we should do when we study the Bible or talk about such things, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, you promised to send your Holy Spirit to teach us all things. We ask that as we read and discuss your word this morning and this weekend, you allow it truly to touch our hearts and to change our lives. And now we pray together for the guidance of your Holy Spirit.
Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. O Lord, who by the light of the Holy Spirit did instruct the hearts of the faithful, grant that by that same Holy Spirit we may be truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
There's about 18 versions of that prayer, so if you say one slightly different, don't worry, God doesn't.
I'm not sure I've ever seen two that were quite the same. But the gist of it is, of course, what is important is as we come together to study the Word of God, asking for his help, sending the Holy Spirit. Everybody has writing utensils and paper if you want it, I think. Anybody need a Bible? I brought a couple of extras, including, this is my favorite one, my Catholic Bible. Seriously, the only reason I bought this is because it says Catholic Bible on the front in big letters, but I enjoy that. And I bring it up because as we come together to study the Bible, it's so easy anymore in basically anything we're doing to get overwhelmed by choice and options, and you can spend a lot of time researching what's the best Bible to use, what's the best this or that, and like in so many other, not that Bible study is necessarily a hobby, but so many things. I know I recently have gotten into running. It's so easy. I want to read all about running and all of this stuff, and it'll make me so much better. And it's easy to get so distracted by that I forget to actually go for a run. Right? The same thing can be true with Bible study. Which is the best Bible? What's the best material to use? What's the best this? What's the best that? By the time you can get so distracted by all of this stuff that you forget to actually read the Bible. Or it's just easier to think about, do I have the right Bible versus versus let me actually get in and read the Bible. And we are turning to God's Word. We are very much about Bible study. And specifically, we are very much about Bible study that actually involves reading the Bible. So that is ultimately what we will be doing this weekend, is we will be talking through some things in the Bible. Everybody here, almost everybody here, but not quite, has gone through most or all of one of our Bible studies or more. Who's actually done this Hebrew study? Good. Not everybody, but some. And some of you are about to, right? Many of you who have not already are about to. So we'll be talking from this, but not like going through it. And this back part. Hebrews is not as long a book as some of the things that we have done Bible studies on. And we kind of designed what we do around, we've got the school year here. And when we looked at and mapped out Hebrews, it was, we really want to do this book, but it's not quite long enough for our format. What can we do? And so we found a theme that emerges throughout the book, the letter to the Hebrews. And we thought, well, why don't we kind of develop that theme somewhere else a little bit more, which is the priesthood. So the way I like to think about this, and the reason it's sort of at the end of that book, is the rest of our studies kind of follow a narrative through a book. And we've picked, for the studies we've developed, some of the more important thematic and foundational books in the Bible, which is great for building a base for this is what Bible study is. I need to know what's in these things in order to be able to read and study the Bible elsewhere and to make the connections and have the reference points and the frame of knowledge that's really going to help me. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to study the Bible. That's kind of building the base or the foundation. What we're going to do this weekend is we're going to try a slightly different approach. Instead of going through a book, we're going to go through a theme. And so we're going to develop something across and throughout some of the Bible instead of just diving in and going through one book. And that theme is, everybody already knows, I ask easy questions to get people to answer. Sorry, I'm going to be right back into the camera.
Eternal blessing.
To get everybody talking. So, we are talking about what this weekend? Last Friday? The priesthood. Yes, good. And we're going to talk about it from the beginning through to Jesus, and we'll probably comment some about what the priesthood means today in our church as well, and what that looks like. And hopefully it will connect to all of these other things that we're talking about, and it will kind of tie together as a beautiful whole, as so many things in our faith do. So, we'll do about half of it this morning. We're going to get through the foundation of the priesthood and what that looked like under the priests and Levites through Moses and the Exodus, all the way through King David, and how the priesthood in the Old Testament developed and evolved. And then tomorrow we'll talk about what happened with and through that as some of the challenges were faced as the kingdom, as the Israelites and Judahites knew it, dissolved, and the people went into exile, and as they came back and tried to reestablish what that priesthood meant, changed. And then as Jesus came along, he added to and changed that yet more. And so we'll talk about a lot of those things. Today we'll get started. Sound good?
Yes.
And we will do this as Bible study, so my notes are mostly just questions that I have written down that are the things that I think I want to talk about, and all of us together, because it's boring for all of us if I do all the talking. You may not think that, but you would if I talked for 2 hours, for sure. So, as we dig in and focus on a theme through the Old Testament and trace it and develop it as we move forward, I find it most helpful to find a central theme or area of emphasis, focus, or attack. So we have found a single verse from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, from the letter to the Hebrews, that we're going to use repeatedly as a frame of reference as we talk through all of this. That's a 7. 7s and 1s look a lot. I should just write this. I'm going to step just out of camera, but we're talking about Hebrews 7:12, and all we're doing is writing it on the board, because we'll talk about this.
You're still in.
Repeatedly. I probably won't be when I get over there.
Okay. The people watching will be able to see the reference, so they'll know what it is anyway.
Yes,
And I'm sure you'll read it too, and talk about it.
a lot. That's why we're writing it. Whether you can read my handwriting is a totally different issue. We'll get back to this in just a minute. As we start, I also like to do sort of a before and after thing as we dig through a theme and take a pulse on what we know about this topic already in advance and what our thoughts and impressions are. So, in the Bible, what's a priest? Any ideas on that?
He stands for Jesus.
It definitely came to be that, but it was not so much in the beginning, right? Before Jesus, what was a priest?
For sacrifice.
Sacrifice for what purpose?
For forgiveness.
You're on top of it.
She went through the Hebrews study.
You're talking Old Testament?
Yep.
The priest stood in for the people to connect with God. They were the conduit or the connector,
Yeah.
Mediator.
Cool. This will be fun.
You got a smart group?
Yes. So, I wrote this up here. We're going to borrow, as we move toward the New Testament, a lot of ideas from the letter to the Hebrews, which will be fun, because it seems like you're already experts, but that'll just make this more fun to go deeper. This is a verse that struck me as really odd when I first read it, for reasons we're about to start talking through, and will more. For when there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law. How many people think that the priesthood and the law are connected? Well, that says that they are, so that's not really the right question. But it's an odd thing.
I didn't really think of it that
Right?
way.
It's an odd thing to me, because we talk about, well, there's this covenant, there's a law, and then I guess, sure, there are also priests, and maybe they started at the same time, but which one is primary? Primary being which serves the other, right?
Which is dependent.
And which is dependent. Before I read this and started thinking about it, I definitely, because we prioritize our talk about the law. This is law, it's important, it's the thing that kind of shapes who we are as the people of God, and as the law developed, our idea of what it is to be one of God's chosen people has shifted and changed, and this law is the thing that shapes everything, and it's very easy to see that. But that's not exactly what this says. When there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law. Which one comes first here?
Sounds like the priesthood.
First the priesthood and then the law.
Like the law adapts to the priesthood.
Yes. So this is a really important institution that we're talking about that I think can get underplayed. Is that the law extends from and in service of the priesthood, and that the priesthood is primary to that. So as we trace the development of the priesthood, we want to look some, without going into the level of depth that Hebrews does on the whole topic. We want to follow along and trace the development of the law as well, because we see that these are connected, but we also want to see if we can recognize this concept as we're going through this and agree with it. And, well, we should agree with it. It's in the Bible. But there are lots of crazy things in the Bible if you read it too closely. And we want to explore this idea throughout the Old Testament. So we will come repeatedly back to this idea. And it'll be really neat, I hope, when we get through to the New Testament and Jesus and our priesthood today. As there will be the lingering question, what is the law that is connected to this particular iteration of the priesthood that we're looking at? And there will be times where that's an easy question to answer, and times like our priesthood today, where maybe that is a much less easy question to answer. And we will build the tool set we need to answer this question moving forward as we go throughout. So this is our guiding principle, so to speak, for the weekend. With me so far?
Yes.
So, priesthood. Who's the first priest in the Bible?
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek. Other answers? Melchizedek is the answer I'm accepting.
You could make a case Adam might be,
You could make a case.
but it's not what we need to do.
He is not called priest, for
No,
sure.
it's not.
Abraham,
What about
maybe.
Moses?
Abraham might be.
I thought it was Aaron.
The first named one.
Let's do some writing.
Yeah, let's,
Paul
yeah.
marker is kind of going to put this over where I don't try to use it again. That one smells very strong, but we'll go with that. Abraham, I like that version of his name better. Zedek. I heard Aaron.
Moses.
I heard Adam. I hear Moses.
Aaron's sons.
Yeah, he was before them,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're gonna kind of subsume them.
Aaron plus.
Yeah, you need some more new markers. Oh,
The
We
black
could
ones
do
work
everything
pretty
in
well.
black and be fine, I just wanted the contrast.
yeah.
We probably will.
Plus, we're gonna be weeding through these, so.
Yes. So, flies are gonna drive me crazy too.
Where is it?
So, some of, filtering through these, chronological order of these people in the Bible. Who's first?
Adam,
Adam, good. Who's second?
Abraham.
Moses.
Moses. Abraham. No,
Oh, no,
Abraham.
it's Abraham.
Abraham comes before Melchizedek because he meets Melchizedek.
Yeah.
And Aaron, Moses.
Who's older when they meet? Just
Oh, Mel.
because
We don't know when
Abraham
Mel-
is in the Bible first, but we don't actually know that he's first.
No, we don't know that.
These two come
Oh, good.
concurrently.
Yeah, and we don't know when he was born and when he died.
And then Moses and Aaron are brothers, so they come. No, that's not true.
But Aaron's older than Moses.
Yeah. These are basically at the same time as well, right?
After Abraham.
So, yeah, we've got periods where Adam is obviously at the beginning of humanity in the Bible because he is the first person. What's his job?
I know what his job is not.
Eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yes. So his job is to tend the garden, right?
So that would be his law.
His law is don't eat from this tree.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. But his service of God is really, he just knows God. We talked some about the idea of the priests serving as conduits or as mediators or as intermediaries between God and the people. Adam doesn't need that. Adam just walks with God. So he is a thing that is important in the original image of humanity and our relationship with God. But he's not what comes to be needed. Priests are not needed when Adam is around because
He has a
people and God are joined together.
Right.
So we're not going to call Adam a priest. He is a thing that we all strive for, and we'll probably reference him a little bit when we get back and talk about Jesus' priesthood. But we're not going to call him a priest for the sake of what we're doing. These two are very related, for sure, and we're going to read some passages that talk about their relationship. In fact, now. People have Bibles? Anybody want one?
Yes. Sure.
Preference?
That one. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I've got one too, if somebody needs one, if anybody else needs one, there's one on the back table there.
If I get to something that's not in my Hebrew study or my notes, I might have to borrow one, but I think I will be fine.
Do you want a Bible?
No.
Okay.
So, Genesis 14, 17 to 20 is what we're going to read.
Genesis 14.
Yes. 14,
Yes.
Yes.
like verses?
17 to 20.
Somebody want to read it?
You sure?
I'll read it.
Who's reading?
Oh, I thought she was. Oh, I'll read it.
Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything.
Great, that's perfect.
And
That's it.
That's it.
We stopped at 20.
Somebody who has not
14.
a Revised Standard Version, but another translation of the Bible, would you read verse 18?
The New American?
I don't
This is
remember
the New
which one
American.
says what I'm going
Well,
for.
you're looking at 15.
Sure, try that.
New American? Which
Oh, no.
verse
Early.
18.
18? No, chapter 14, verse 18.
Yeah.
Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and being a priest of God Most High, he blessed Abram with these words.
Okay, I'm not hitting what I want. I'm not sure people translate it that way. So he is called priest of God Most High. But that can legitimately be translated this way. Just because it wasn't doesn't mean it can't be. And I think it's an apt description of Melchizedek here as the priest of God Most High. When he shows up, he is the first and the only priest that we have seen. When
Only
he
named
shows
one.
up. Yes.
He's the only one named as a priest.
So that is not insignificant.
I wonder why the translation doesn't catch that.
Probably
out the
because
article.
the idea that there is a single priest is an odd thing to the translators, and it can be, the article could be either, it could be A or B, and it seems there's no small amount of interpretation involved in translation, for sure.
Yeah,
So,
there's no A or the in the
Yeah,
RSV.
they
It's
dodged
just
Yeah, he's just priest.
it's just
Yeah.
priests. Yeah.
yeah,
They dodged the issue by leaving
Yeah.
the article off.
Yes.
They don't know,
Which-
so they don't put it in.
yeah, and it can, all legitimate translations, but we're going to talk about it in terms of this, because it's neat. And I won't. But this is my interpretation, so you're welcome to think A or just priest as well. None of them would be a wrong translation, but I like this one. Because we have not seen a priest before Melchizedek. 14 chapters into Genesis, we get our first one. He sort of comes out of nowhere, and then he kind of goes away into nowhere. And it's so here is an encounter between Abraham and Melchizedek. Who's a priest in this encounter? Who's not a priest in this encounter?
Abraham.
Yes. Abraham, not a priest.
He's just
Holy man, absolutely. Just because we say someone is not a priest does not mean we're saying that they're a bad person or not a servant of God, right? Who in this room is a priest? Right? Who in this room is trying to live the life that in service to God? Right? You can be a good person without being a priest. So when we say these people are not priests, we're not saying they're bad people. We're just saying we relate to God differently. We have different roles. We are talking about the role and category of a priest. So Melchizedek is. What does that look like? Here.
What does he do?
Yes, what does he do?
Then we'll know what priests do, what this priest is.
It's got bread and wine.
Who is he?
He
Gave
brought
bread and
the
wine.
He's a king.
Yes, he has another job.
He's a
He
king.
is.
King.
What's the Salem mean?
peace.
Yes. So he is the king
Rulers.
of peace. Salem arguably eventually becomes Jerusalem. So he is a king, and he is a priest. He's not in the Bible very much, but what's there focuses even less on him being a king than it does on him being a priest. That's just sort of, sure. So he is a king, he is a priest. What else does he do?
Bread and wine.
He offers bread and wine.
To Abraham. He brings it out, offers bread.
He went out to him.
Yeah.
He
He
went
brought
out to
out
meet him.
bread and wine.
Yes, I'm going to stop writing all these things. We'll just talk about it and keep it in our heads. The board's going to get way too full if we do this. What does Abraham do? There's an exchange that takes place here, right? This is very clearly a thing where an exchange is occurring. They meet. Who goes to meet whom again?
Abraham goes to meet Melchizedek, but Melchizedek comes out.
Yes. But Abraham goes to meet Melchizedek. So of the two, which is the more important? Melchizedek is more important than Abraham, which is a thing that is easily buried because Abraham gets a lot more space in the book than Melchizedek does. Melchizedek gets 4 verses here in Genesis. and then a little bit elsewhere. Abraham gets more volume of writing, and his accomplishments are arguably much greater. But Abraham regards Melchizedek as his superior here, which is interesting.
It's of interest that Abraham has been fighting with all these other kings and just won, and this is the king of Salem. He has not been involved in any of the fighting. He's the king of peace. So the battle's over and Abraham goes to see the king of peace.
Yes,
Abraham isn't Abraham yet.
correct.
No, he's
He's
still
Abram at this point, so
He is.
Yes, Pat,
he hasn't
correct.
actually had the changeover yet.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant in Genesis too. We probably won't go into that a lot, but it is a
Right.
very good point, Pat.
Yes.
I don't think it really says that Abraham went out to meet him, though.
No, Melchizedek went
Yeah.
Yeah.
out to him.
Yeah.
But
he came here. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I hadn't thought about
Melchizedek
that.
went out to meet him.
Yeah.
But Abraham has been over, I just did this
Yeah.
map for Genesis. He's been running around doing all this battling, and then he goes to where
Yeah.
Melchizedek is.
And the king of peace.
And the king of peace, yes, he goes to
Yes.
see.
And we have an exchange. So, in the exchange, what happens? The exchange just kind of happens over a meal here, right? Bread and wine become
The
the thing that is offered and is the meal that is shared. So, first priest, what he does is he blesses, and what he receives is a tithe. There's another passage about Abraham in the Old Testament, or about Melchizedek in the Old Testament, in Psalm 110, verses 1 through 4.
Some of these people just did a Psalm study too,
Yeah.
so they ought to know it. Psalm 110, verse 4. These are some of our greatest hits in our Bible studies. We keep going back and forth.
Like Melchizedek, you are a priest.
Yes.
Yes, that is that's the key phrase, right? The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. That's kind of a weird throw-in. Just a random verse in the middle of the psalm, priest forever, order of Melchizedek. So, and Hebrews talks, the book and the study talked about this a lot. And focus on the difference of order a little bit. So, does everybody understand what the word order means in this context? It's totally okay if you don't. It's a little weird.
I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Yes. So ultimately we're going to talk about a couple different iterations of the priesthood. This that is named by the Psalms as the order of Melchizedek, and then we have the Aaronic priesthood that we'll get to. And they follow different rules, and they do different things. Like we are here at this lovely abbey that exists as part of the order of St. Benedict. Right? It is a group of monks who live by certain rules and follow certain guidelines and approach God and come to know God following a specific spirituality. They are part of one order. But then you have an order of Franciscans and an order of Dominicans, and you have these different orders of service of God. The priesthoods exist similarly, so that you have a priest in the order of Melchizedek is a kind of priesthood, and then you end up having a different kind of priesthood. This is set apart, and it's different priesthood from what we see come later. It follows different rules. So, in this order of Melchizedek, we see how do these priests go about serving this priest? We haven't seen more than one. Serving as intermediaries between humanity and God. They do it by means of this blessing, is where we are. And then we see another thing about it. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. How do you become a priest of this order, and how do you stop being a priest of this order?
You don't
Does
stop. You do
Yes.
not stop, and so it's an eternal order.
Who is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek so far?
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek. Yes, we have one priest in the order of Melchizedek so far, Melchizedek. And he is a priest forever, priest of God Most High in his order. And it is, much has been made by lots of different people about the fact that we don't see Melchizedek's birth or his death. The author of the Psalms and the author of the letter to the Hebrews builds on this theme, says that suggests that that's intentional, and that we're meant to see him as eternal, as this mysterious priest figure that appears. It's an important part of who he is and how we see him, that he has no beginning or end mentioned in the Bible. And so we can see him as eternal priest. You are a priest forever. Seems to be a significant characteristic of this order. And that becomes hugely important as we talk through the letter to the Hebrews, but kind of that line of following and talking about things would take all of our time and then some this weekend. So we'll leave it with that is the thing that is there. So this original priesthood is a thing that is defined by this idea of priest forever, order of Melchizedek. You see blessing as part of an interchange. You see that Melchizedek, for his priestly function, is rewarded as he receives a tenth of Abraham's possessions.
Does it become a special, you know, how you said it was different from the line of Aaron? Does this, and through Psalm 110, become Melchizedek, David, Jesus?
Is David eternal?
Well, it says, here it is, David, it says, the Lord has sworn, and you will not waver like Melchizedek. You are a priest forever.
You could make an argument because there will always be someone in his line.
Absolutely. We get to that
That
when
is
we get to
forever.
the section on David, so that's an excellent question.
Yes.
We probably should table it.
Yes.
I don't know if
Okay.
Matthew wants to, but you're
Okay.
absolutely thinking
Yes,
along the right
we will
lines.
get there yet
I
today.
just wondered if we had kind of like
There's a
two
progression.
parallels going. We've got Melchizedek's line and Aaron's line.
Yep,
We do. And then
We
we're
do.
going to see what happens when we get to David.
Okay, thank you.
yes,
David is a key point, so
Right.
you're on track.
Okay.
yeah. Everybody kind of got your hands around this Melchizedek thing a little bit?
So that priesthood's eternal, it involves blessing, and it collects a tenth.
Yes.
That's what we know.
Yes. So far, and the law that it serves is you sin, you die. You don't sin, you don't die. Of course, that is the law. And it's not so explicit, but it definitely, his priesthood, that blessing has tremendous power over life and death, as it turns out. Awesome. Now, on to what is more commonly thought of as the priesthood in the Old Testament, and definitely is the one that lingers. This reading is quite a handful. If somebody is feeling ambitious, you can read it, or I will as well. Numbers 18, 1 to 32. There are fewer weird names and things, but it definitely goes on and on. I'll just do it. Numbers 18, 1 to 32.
Verse 18, 1 to 32.
So the Lord said to Aaron, "You and your sons and your father's house with you shall bear iniquity in connection with the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear iniquity in connection with your priesthood. And with you bring your brethren also, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may join you and minister to you while you and your sons with you are before the tent of the covenant. They shall attend you and attend to all the duties of the tent, but shall not come near to the vessels of the sanctuary or to the altar, lest they and you die. They shall join you and attend to the tent of meeting for all the service of the tent, and no one else shall come near you. And you shall attend to the duties of the sanctuary and the duties of the altar, that there be wrath no more upon the sons of Israel. And behold, I have taken your brethren the Levites from among the sons of Israel. They are a gift to you, given to the Lord, to do the service of the tent of meeting. And you and your sons with you shall attend to your priesthood for all that concerns the altar and that is within the veil, and you shall serve. I give your priesthood as a gift, and anyone else who comes near shall be put to death.
Do you want me to pick up? Do you want me to pick up?
Yeah, let's pause for a minute. We
Okay.
can unpack that a little bit before
Okay,
we
good.
keep going.
I just
Um,
see.
So we have, who are Levites?
One of the tribes.
Specific
One
tribe.
of the tribes. How many tribes were there?
12.
12. So we have, and which tribe does Aaron belong to? Levites.
Levi.
So we have a distinction here. We have, what did the Levites do, according to this?
Priesthood
Are-
comes from them.
Okay,
Guard the
definitely
covenant.
serve. So here we get an important distinction. I'm going to erase some of this because I'm about to go blind, a little blind with Kenny here. It's an important distinction here, wherein all priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. So the whole tribe of Levi has been set aside for the service of God in the tent of meeting. But only certain members of it can actually perform the sacrifices and have full access. And those are
Aaron and the kids.
Aaron and his kids. So, what qualifies you to be a priest in this form of priesthood? How do you become a priest?
Birth.
Birth. You are a direct descendant of Aaron, or you are not a priest in this sense. And Levites, also servants of God, but they do not have full faculties, so to speak. The difference between our priests and deacons is a reasonable approximation of this. We have a diaconate set aside who have privileges up above and beyond the laity and specific ministries and do a number of different things. But there are certain, and especially priestly functions, that are reserved only to ordained priests. And here also we see there's a class of people set apart for service of God, and within that class there's a subgroup that has the job specifically of carrying out the duties of the priesthood.
And within that, there's
So all
high
Levites
priests.
are lay people to the priests, they are all have a service, a specific service to God?
All Levites do have
Yeah.
specific service.
Yes. So they've been assigned, they've been given, they've been given as a gift to the priesthood. They're there to help the priesthood perform their duties. In modern medical practice, an idea like this has emerged strongly. Probably, if anybody's been to the doctor in the last several years, you'll notice how small of an amount of time you spend with the actual doctor. The idea being the very skilled service that can only be done by the most trained and skilled individuals. If you take away everything else from that person, they can focus more on the things that you have to have a doctor to do. The same is true. This idea emerged because you want the priests to be spending the most of their time and their expertise and their mission dedicated specifically to what we will talk about is the role of the priests. So the things that are not specifically and explicitly that, but that still have to be done in the service of what they're doing, they have helpers to help them do. It's not talked about much in the scripture, but if you think about it, practically it makes a great deal of sense that sacrificing all these animals is really messy and can be kind of gross. And it turns out the priests don't have to clean up after themselves, right? I am a priest. I just come, here's an altar, I have all my implements, I've got my fire going, I show up, I sacrifice the animal, I sprinkle some blood, and then I go and I take the good part with me when I leave to eat. and then I leave. And then the Levites come in and clean up the mess, and they take the leftovers with them to eat, is sort of the arrangement. And the reason for that being, you don't need an overabundance of priests at this point in time. It's a relatively small people. The job of this priesthood is to make atonement with God. We'll talk a little bit more about that here presently. But you only need a few dedicated individuals who are around and able to do that. It starts with Aaron and his sons. It's a very small number. And then you have significantly more people in charge of helping. And those people, all the tribe of Levi, give up their inheritance in the promised land in service of this ministry, and instead receive a tenth from everyone else. So, how many tribes are there?
12.
Which is greater, a tenth or a 12th? Yes. So they give up their stake in the promised land to get slightly more. So they are rewarded for their service. Good. What's the law? We're jumping around a little bit here, but this event happens pretty much concurrently with another event at Sinai, which is a pretty big deal.
That was a big clue, kids. What's the law at Sinai?
Yep, the Ten Commandments. Yes. So we have gotten out of Egypt, and we are wandering in the desert, we being the people of God. And as we are doing so, we are entering into a new relationship with God, which necessitates a new priesthood. So here we have a new priesthood and new rules. And these priests are responsible for, in a sense, for governing these rules. Insofar as if you break them and you are facing the consequences of that, which is still death. You said you die, is still there. If you break the rules, the priests are there to help mitigate the consequences. You don't necessarily have to die. There is this new, which...
That minute.
Yes, to us...
Physical death,
right,
that minute.
To us, this still sounds weird. It sounds so barbaric, right? You kill an animal and you live. But from one point of view, it makes a lot of sense. I have sinned, God is owed a life as a result of my transgression. And what this priesthood is empowered to do is to offer a different life in place of mine for the debt that I owe temporarily. So I steal from my neighbor, or I even envy my neighbor's house. I'm like, man, that yard is so green. Whoops, I sinned. Here's an animal to kill. Now, God, we're good, right? Clearly, that is not a long-term solution to really fixing my relationship with God. But it's a lot better than just, I sinned and I'm screwed and there's nothing I can do. What was before is not as effective as this. So we've got kind of a neat deal. And the priesthood is the means by which humanity can be reconciled with God. You have a new law, same punishment, but now you have same general rule, don't sin, but there's a lot more clarity as to what that entails. And now there is a way, if you do transgress, that you don't necessarily instantly lose your relationship with God. So the priests allow for a deeper relationship between God and the people. Originally, what kind of relationship did all the people we saw have this blessing from Melchizedek have with God? How was Abraham's relationship with God?
They're tight.
How was Isaac's relationship?
They're tight.
Yeah, how was Isaac's relationship with God? How was Jacob's?
They're tight.
Right? So this blessing became a means of building a relationship with God that came from the order of Melchizedek. Now this sacrifice likewise becomes a means of building a relationship with God. I know what I'm supposed to do, and to have recourse if I don't, so that I can have a relationship with God. It's not, I sinned, I killed my brother, I'm cast out, and I have a mark on my forehead, and I'm cast out from the presence of God forever. Now there is actually a way of making amends. But it's an incomplete way, right?
You're still going to die.
Yes. Who lived forever after the time of Aaron, before Jesus? That's nobody, right? Maybe Elijah, but probably not. That's a weird exception we're not going to worry about. As a general rule, people did not live forever at this point in time, meaning death ultimately still reigned, meaning the effects of sin have not been totally mitigated, right? We have a way of, I don't immediately lose my relationship with God if I break one of these commandments, which is an important part. It's too easy to see the Old Testament law, and Paul goes on and on about this, the Old Testament law as being punitive and a thing that separates people from God. But that's not at all what it was meant to do. It's a pretty narrow scope of, if you just follow these rules, you can have a relationship with God. It's not a thing that suddenly is excluding all the people who don't follow it, because nobody had this kind of relationship. It's instead a thing that is now including some people who are willing to do some things. So this law is not exclusionary, it's inclusive. It is, now you are being invited to this new thing that you can have and participate in, and here are the rules that govern it. And bonus, here's something you can do if you mess up to get back in. God wants you in, and the tool, the thing that he implements to help you be in this thing and this relationship with God is the priesthood. And that is always the call of the priesthood. That is the core function of the priesthood, is to draw people in to relationship with God. And how that exactly works depends on the rules that are in play, the law that is governing what that relationship looks like, which changes over time as God draws us closer to him. But as God says, I want a different relationship with you people, then he says we need a different priesthood to facilitate that. And then he says with that also comes different rules. So here we have the rules that shape the destiny of the people of God, the Israelites. These commandments and the accompanying 2 giant rule books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, which, 10 commandments sounds great, but then you add 2 whole books on top of that, and you start to get a fair number of rules. The book of Leviticus is just a rule book for these priests, right? We have like the general instruction for the liturgy of the hours. We have these books that explain how to do priestly functions for priests, right? You don't just magically get ordained and all of a sudden know how to say Mass. There are very specific rules and guidelines. The book of Leviticus is like that. This is the kind of sacrifice you have to offer for this sin, and if it's like this, then you have to burn the whole thing, and if it's like this, you can use a cereal offering, it ends up being, there are a lot of rules and regulations here, and you have a class dedicated to carrying it out. But their goal, their function, is to draw God's people into a relationship with him, and to do so in service of the new law. So far, so good?
Well, okay, but you may have lost me just a bit there. So, the priests and the priests have this specific function, and the remaining Levites help support them in this function. And the people maintain a relationship with God via this priestly intermediary.
Yes.
Now, we haven't changed the law again yet, have we? I mean,
Right. We just got 10 commandments, right?
Okay, so this is before the 10 Commandments?
I don't remember if it comes right before or right after, but I remember that it is essentially concurrent with. It's in the same chain of events you get. The commandments are given and the priesthood is established. And the people make a covenant with God. That's not really a sign for covenant. That's a blessing. That's not what I meant. But so it's all kind of combined to create this new relationship. Make sense?
I think so.
Getting there?
I'm trying to hang on.
Everybody else still with me? I'm going to make sure that I think you need to read the rest of this. because there's a lot. Yeah, we probably should, just to describe more of what this priesthood looks like.
Do you want me to read, Matthew?
I can, it's fine. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "And behold, I have given you whatever is kept of the offerings made to me, all the consecrated things of the sons of Israel. I have given them to you as a portion, and to your sons as a perpetual debt. This shall be yours of the most holy things, reserved from the fire. Every offering of theirs, every cereal offering of theirs, and every guilt offering of theirs, which they render to me, shall be most holy to you and to your sons. In a most holy place shall you eat of it. Every male may eat of it. It is holy to you. This also is yours, the offering of their gift, all the wave offerings of the sons of Israel. I have given them to you and to your sons and daughters with you as a perpetual debt. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat of it." Pause here for a second. What's happening here?
Receiving a blessing.
He's
they're
deciding what they can
sway.
eat,
Yes.
what they can have.
As this is your compensation for being a priest. Always being a priest comes with some sort of compensation. Right? Melchizedek got a tenth of Abraham's stuff for giving a blessing. That was a good day's work. These priests, for offering sacrifices in the tent, receive the sacrifice. Right? The idea is, I give this to God, and now the priest gets. Can anybody think of any ways that system might go wrong or be abused? It seems pretty impervious to that. I'm sure it'll work out fine. It is a totally legitimate thing, and it's a thing Paul talks about later that persists, is when you give yourself in service to God as this person who's responsible for helping bring the people into relationship with God, you deserve recompense for that function, that ministry, beyond just your eternal glory and reward in heaven, which is definitely a real thing and is amazing, but you also have to keep body and soul together on earth long enough to achieve that task, which involves eating and having shelter and those things. And God takes care of his priests in the Old Testament. There are provisions for, and it would have been even more important then than it is now, when it took more labor and more people working to sustain humanity, right? We live in a world where a relatively small percentage of our people have to work to provide food for us. But technology has allowed a lot of that. At this time, more and more people had to work to provide for the basic needs of everyone. So it was a bigger deal when you could separate out a 1/12 of your people and say, these people are dedicated to the service of God. You have to make provisions for the care of those people. And this is a big deal that this is happening. And had they not been provided for by God, it's the thing that would not have been able to happen. Which, if you think about it, God in his infinite wisdom took care of this, is why all of the things that are offered are edible. I take from what is my work to survive, a thing that is part of my own life, and I give it and share it with these priests who are helping me ensure and continue my life in a spiritual and also very real mortal sense, in terms of keeping God's wrath from me, and in terms I give back part of the life that has been spared for me to the priests so that they can continue. It's still very much a relationship of life and death, and I am giving of my sustenance to them, and in almost every case the priesthood then gets to keep what has been offered and gets to use that as their own sustenance so that they can continue to provide. It's a pretty neat system, actually.
Meaning the grain and the
Yeah,
meat and the
yeah,
wine and,
yeah.
you know, that.
Yes, so very rarely is a Holocaust prescribed, which is a complete burning of the offering, right? You think grain is offered, what is a wave offering? A wave offering is, I take a bowl of cereal and I wave it around and then I give it to the priest, who takes it and eats it, or shares it with his family. But there are the best parts, the priests don't get to share. Just the priest eats all the best things. And then the priest's family and the Levites get the leftovers. And your offerings to God are supposed to be the best things you have as well. So the priests get to receive the best of the best in this system. And then the Levites get the second best of the best. And then the other people get what's left over or what's extra, is how this system works. So, the other 11
non-Levites,
tribes.
the
The
Israelites,
Judahites, the...
Benjaminites, the Ephraimites,
There are 12
Reubenites.
tribes. Yeah.
So this.
I go out and work in the field, and I give my good stuff to the priests in exchange for making my relationship with God good. And then I eat the rest of the stuff I grew.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But the stuff that he gave to the priest goes to the
Yeah.
priest.
Then the
and
priest
Levites.
says, this is the best part, I'm keeping this. Here, Levites, you can have this other part.
Okay, okay.
But then what, so this group of people we're talking about were only Levites? Because, so the priest gets the best, the Levites gets the next best.
Yep.
Are there other people in this hierarchy that are beyond that, besides Levites?
The 12 tribes get everything that wasn't
Not
offered.
really. It's mostly, I mean, there's really pretty, and this is exactly where we're going. This becomes sort of an administrative structure as well, right? And you have limited resources to support such a group of people. The priests and the Levites take on administrative functions and governing functions.
So
as
the
well.
other 11 tribes, what do they get?
Everything they don't give the priests.
They
So
get the
they have,
9/10 of what
they have 9/10.
Yeah.
The 9/10.
But if you're a Levite, you get it first before the other tribes, is what I'm asking.
Yes. You
So
get
The
the best of,
top 10.
It's like that trickle down
Yeah.
economics.
yes.
So by the time you get down there, there's not much.
Well, yeah, right. You get 9/10 of everything you make, right? Which is, if you think about it, better than we do today.
Right.
I get less than 9/10 of everything I make. It's not unlike a tax, but instead of buying government and freedom from oppression by the government, you are buying someone to make things right between you and God for the paltry price of 1/10 of everything that you make.
But the Levites are taking care of it so that you'll get that.
You have to give it. It's kind of an honor system. So if you don't give it, all that happens is if you sin, you don't have any way of changing your relationship of fixing your relationship with God. You can opt out. I could say, I'm not going to give to the priests, but then by the law, I'm also out of favor with God.
The priests have nothing to
surely sinned.
sacrifice in your
Yeah.
name then.
And I'm out of compliance with the law then. So we see this is a bit of an unusual concept for us because we've gone to such lengths to separate law from religion. But here, law and the practice thereof is joined with religion. The law is religion. And governance is religion. So,
Is there an analogy between this and what happens when Peter is establishing the church on earth? And there's a part in that part of where the people bring everything to the community. Is this kind of like the same thing? Everybody joins in, but they bring this to the community and it's kind of giving of what they have. Any
yes.
similarity?
Yes, for sure. And you see that, and then there is actually a name based on a story with Peter for what happens when you try to buy the ability to carry out some of these functions. Is simony, you don't get to do that either.
Yeah.
So, yes, the early communities very much, but it was a little different because they're sharing with one another.
Right.
They're letting the church divide what is needed among everyone.
But Peter's
Giving everything.
And it goes through. Yeah.
priesthood is to minister.
Yes.
And these people say, well, this is what we have to bring to you. You don't have time to go fish or whatever.
Right.
So this is what we're bringing to the communities
For sure.
so that you can go do the priestly things.
For sure. And if you remember, Peter gets to the point pretty quickly where he says, I shouldn't even be messing around with giving all this stuff out. I need helpers.
That's when
and
you get
we get
Stephen.
deacons.
Yeah.
Specifically because it was even that which was definitely a good thing, was distracting him from
Primary
what he
purpose.
thought was his primary ministry. But it works very much the same way, except here, the priests and Levites aren't giving anything out back to anybody when they get it. Here it's, I send here priests, here's an animal for you to eat, so God and I are good again, right? And the priests are never saying, oh, you over there, I see you're hungry. Here's some of what I have. In fact, this says I can't give it to you. There's certain stuff that the priests alone can eat. It is their portion, and it's pretty strict about making sure that it stays that way. Whereas the early church was like, who needs stuff? We have stuff, you need stuff, we're going to give it to you. And we hope as Christians today that is still our attitude of, if I have stuff and I see someone who needs stuff, hopefully I will share until everyone has what they need, and everyone will work together and in a common service is the ideal. And without Jesus at the center of that, we've seen throughout history that goes very badly because the potential for abuse is high. Which we also see as this priesthood develops, right? We have a system that allows for the existence of a priesthood, but it is also an easily exploitable system where you have this class that is entitled to a certain portion of people's stuff. And if they're holy, it works great. But as soon as you get priests who are not focused on, I want to call people into relationship with God, and instead are focused on, I'm pretty comfortable, I don't have to work very hard, and there are ways to live a pretty great life for my time period being a priest, let's focus on that, then there are problems inherent in this system. It's much better than what was there, but it is vulnerable to abuse, which we will see.
And on both sides. I mean,
yes.
You're saying that, hey,
I'm going to go kill my neighbor because I've got stuff, and then I'll just sacrifice it.
or I'm only here because I've sinned.
Right.
You know, and so here's what I'm calling a tenth of everything I own.
Right.
Or whatever. It's like, maybe it's not, maybe it is. Or are they supposed to offer a tenth at a specific time, kind of like a tax? And then whether you've sinned or not, which we all know we have, but whether it's a specific sin or not, or do they have to bring these things in for each specific sin and say, hey, you know, I know I just lied last week, but I just killed my other neighbor.
I think it's both. I think it's actually, technically, I think it ends up being a tenth on top of special sacrifice. Yes. But yeah, definitely, that's a great point. It's open to abuse. But if you're rich, you can sin all you want to, right? It's,
legalism.
Yeah, it's open to the same idea of, we've been accused of things with indulgences, but you see it with now confession is free. People accuse us as Catholics of doing this and saying, I can do whatever I want because I'm on Friday night and or Saturday night and I'll just go to confession in the morning before Mass and everything will be fine. We get accused of taking it too lightly as it is because it's free. But here, this system is basically, I can buy a relationship with God, which sounds really bad to us because we've evolved past it. But what you have is you can have relationship with God. Before you couldn't have relationship with God. So we're moving in a very positive direction. And if you are holy, you don't have to be rich to have relationship with God. You don't have to have, because it's proportional to your income, you don't have to have
tenth of whatever you have, whether it's a
it.
lot or whether it's...
And it's just open to abuse by the rich and powerful, which is a thing that we will need to see fixed if this priesthood is to last. And that is still a challenge today, but we do pretty great with it. And we'll talk a lot about how we get from here to there. So, political power ends up also resting with, we've got a religious authority granted by God via the law to the priests. And that is wonderful. But because you have people who are set aside and have some time on their hands and are not tending their land because they don't have any, you also starts to emerge an administrative or ruling class starts to emerge a little bit from the priesthood. They tend to be leaders among the people. Priests and Levites have an honored place. So that's where we are here as a result of the Exodus. Then This is not going to be a huge change, but history evolves, and the people wandering around have a series of other magistrates who are responsible for judging, who are called judges. The idea being the people don't continue not to have explicit kings or leaders. So you have different people carrying out parts of the function, all related to the law, but you don't actually have anyone vested with political authority. The authority is totally religious. And the people look at that and they say, we want to be like other people, we want a king. And everybody keeps saying, no, you don't. Seriously, you don't want that. That God is your king, don't do that. And the people keep saying, no, we know what we want. We want a king. And ultimately, they talk, their prophets, we'll talk a lot more about what a prophet is in later studies and in another retreat. I think we have a series of 3 of these planned, priests, prophets, and kings. We are on priests, so we won't delve too much. But the people talk their prophet into helping them set up a kingship. So now all of a sudden you have a difference. You have political authority and religious authority. And there's a question, how is the priesthood going to adapt to having a king? We won't worry so much about Saul. That was a big mess. Definitely not how it was intended to be. Saul gets in big trouble for actually trying to act like a priest. He thinks, or a prophet. At any rate, he tries to take authority that is not his. You could argue about exactly what, but he makes some sacrifices and tries to get other religious opinions outside of the kosher ones about what he should do, and he generally does not deal well with the religious authorities, and there is tension as a result, and he doesn't follow God.
Our next study, 2018, is on 1st and 2nd Samuel, and it'll focus primarily on kings, but with an emphasis on what's going on with the beginning of the prophets at the same time. So you'll get more of that in another year.
So Saul stops being king, and the new king is called, anointed, who is King David. And David is one of 3 kings who gets to reign over what is called the United Kingdom, which is, you've got 12 tribes in the whole Promised Land, the Holy Land, all under a single king, through Saul, David, and Solomon. And when Solomon dies, the kingdom splits and it never reunites in that form. But at the time, so we have a new emerging kingship. The people are really excited. They unite behind the king. He's able to bring everybody together in a way they weren't before. As a result, there are resources and military strength, and they conquer a lot of their neighbors. They expand their territory. Things are going really well. David is beloved of God, and God blesses the people. And we've got a good situation in general with a nice holy man at the top as a king. But there's still the question, and it's not talked about very much, of how does the priesthood adapt to having a new center of power? And we should talk about that a little bit. We've got a couple of passages here to look at. The first one being 2 Samuel 6, 1 through 19.
I just have a real quick question. So we've got the law changing every time the priests change.
Yeah.
So now we've got this mixture of priests, king, political, religious.
Yeah.
How does that affect the law?
It's a great question. What we want to look at as we read these things, and we'll talk about it, is did the priesthood change as an institution, or did it just change practically in terms of how it's administered? In other words, is this, once David comes into the picture, is this a different priesthood that needs a new law? Or is it the same priesthood that just adapts and kind of administratively changes? And depending on our answer to that question will determine, do we need a new law? Do we need to try to track all that down? So let's see where we stand, and we'll figure out if we need to find a new law.
Okay. What are the verses, Matthew?
6, 1 through 19.
Do you need a reader?
I don't care, I can do
6
it.
Samuel.
I'll just keep talking, I'm fine with that. And I think everybody can probably hear me better than anybody
Yeah,
else.
I think so too.
So, David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. Who were the chosen men of Israel, by the way?
Levites?
12 tribes.
Is it everybody? It could be that. Who else might be? It could, without more context, it could also be the army, right? I'm going to go around and I'm going to find all chosen men who are in, but it's more likely the leaders of all the tribes. It's an interesting thing. There's a big council of people who matter. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Bela, Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who sits enthroned on the cherubim. And they carried the ark of God upon a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were driving the new cart with the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel were making merry before the Lord with all their might, with psalms and lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. And when they came to the threshing floor of Hakon, Uzzah put his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God struck him there because he put forth his hand to the ark. And he died there because of the ark of God. And back in Exodus, when the ark was built, there was a rule put in place. You can't touch the ark. And then that's why they had, other than the priests, that's why they had poles that they put through it and used to carry it, because you couldn't touch the ark or you would die. So here, it looks like it's going to fall, and Uzzah was legitimately just trying to protect the ark. But still, you break the rule, bad things happen. He touched it and he died. So, David, who's organizing this whole procession, right? That's kind of a buzzkill in the middle of your procession. It's your party when you're taking the ark up, and all of a sudden somebody touches it by mistake and is dead. And David sort of rethinks his plan a little bit. And David was angry because the Lord had broken forth upon Uzzah, and that place is called Perez-Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" So David was not willing to take the ark of the Lord into the city of David. But David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. And the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. So here we see, right, the ark is God traveling with the people. And now the people have come to a rest, and the idea was, and settled in place, and the idea was we want God to settle with us, but then on the way, oh, this is for real, this is scary, and maybe we can keep him at a little bit of a distance. But then, and that's an easy thing to do when you have an encounter with God, is God is awesome and wonderful, and I love him and all that, but I'll just keep him at a little bit of a distance, because too close, that could be problematic. But then, looking on from a distance, David sees, oh, this is going really well for the people who have God where they are. Maybe I do want that. And it was told King David, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. And when those who bore the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling. And David was belted with the linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn. So, the ark of the Lord is God's presence among the people, right? Mm-hmm. Who's deciding where God goes among the people? David. Who's responsible for serving as the intermediary between God and the people and calling the people into relationship with God? The priests. Whoops. So, how is David acting?
And he's wearing the ephod.
Yes,
and he's like a priest.
So David is wearing clothes like a priest and is assuming a significant amount of power that belongs to the priests.
And what line is David from?
Yes. What tribe is David from?
Judah.
He is
What
not.
tribe is David not from?
Levi.
Levi. So is David a priest?
No.
No. Is David acting like a priest?
Yes.
Yeah. Does God dislike him?
No.
God chose David.
Yes.
After my own heart.
So-
I don't think he
Because
likes
the
it.
people wanted a king.
Well,
Yeah.
he doesn't kill him or anything.
He doesn't kill him or anything. David is described as a man after God's own heart, not as someone usurping religious authority to corruptly rule God's people. This is an arrangement that is seen as good by everyone. And the priests are going along with it, right? They're in the procession. Everybody wanted the king, and
Yay,
because
David.
of that, everybody is saying, this is what the king does. So now all of a sudden, you have all of this, and then you have a king who is above the priest, but he's not necessarily a priest either. And so political authority is vested entirely in David. As this is all shaking out, because of the union between political and religious authority at the time, David has a great deal of religious authority as well. He's the boss not only of the state, but of the church.
So this is the beginning of the fuzzy lines of separation of church and state.
Yes, only insofar as before you had no state to try to separate. Now you have a state and you have
We're
a
getting
church.
to that
Yeah.
gray area here.
And the people don't want it separate. Everybody seems to want it with David. And it works, as so many of these systems do. It works with David because he is a holy and God-fearing man. And then David passes and his son takes over, and his son says, well, state religion is now going to go up on these high places and worship Baal because my wife likes him. And we don't need to follow all these laws because, some of them are pretty crazy and onerous. And we'll just follow some of the ones that we like and not worry about some of the other ones. And, these priests of Baal talk about some pretty fun things. Maybe we could do some of these things instead of some of those things. And all of a sudden, it's a real problem that the king has religious authority. Because the priests are there and theoretically are still saying, no, serve God. Like, no, you all are sinning. But the king, who has been implicitly given religious authority, is saying, no, we're all about Baal this year. And it creates a tension. And that tension leads to the dissolution, not of the priesthood, but of the kingship. The kingdom falls apart. But the priesthood struggles, but rebounds, at least in half the kingdom. So,
Can I repeat that back to you?
yeah.
So what you're saying is the priesthood stayed intact. It was the king that went after Baal and led the people astray to the false gods.
Yes. And half the people went along, right?
Okay.
Arguably all the people, but some of them came back around. So you ended up with two kings. You ended up with Israel and Judah. Israel being the northern kingdom and consisting of 9 tribes. That's right. And the southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin, became the kingdom of Judah, which 9 plus 2 is 11, and Levi is 12, and Levi doesn't have any land. So there are definitely still priests and Levites in the kingdom of Judah, and then there are 2 tribes. And,
You guys should add 10 in the northern
Yeah.
kingdom, Matthew,
Oh.
9. But-
well, they counted the half tribes, right?
Yeah.
Ephraim and Manasseh.
Yeah.
So,
So, one question, were all the prophets priests?
very few of the
Almost
prophets
none of
were
them.
priests, if any. A prophet is a different role. A prophet is someone who, you could say, speaks for God. There's a lot more that can be said on the topic.
And we will
Yeah.
on another weekend.
So the priesthood acts as a corrective to the people, and the kingship sort of goes along on its own. The prophets are basically a corrective measure for the kings and the priests. When they go astray, God sends a representative to right things as his voice, so to speak. And prophets are charged with seeing things as God does.
I think it's interesting while we were on David, that David and Melchizedek both are king of Salem, king of Jerusalem. So you've got, and Melchizedek is a priest, so you've got this pairing again, sort of. David's not a priest, but he's acting like one, and he is a king, and he's in the same place as Melchizedek, and there's kind of a deal about him blessing the people when he brings the ark in. So, were you going to get to that? Am I? Okay. It's just an aside, but it is an interesting aside.
Okay, you said 2 in the south.
Yes.
What happens to the Levites?
They never have land.
They never have land, so they're distributed throughout.
Remember in the Psalms, you are my inheritance, O Lord. That's God is the inheritance of the priesthood. They are given God chooses them.
So at this point, the Levites are really in pretty bad shape, because once it gets split, their purpose and reason for existence, they really don't fit anymore.
Right, especially with the people serving false gods. What does the priest of the old God do when we're more interested in going to these high places than going up to Jerusalem? And some of that would have happened because the priests did not protect their responsibility effectively. They allowed the authority that is theirs to be taken by the king.
So it was a really bad time to be a Levite at that point, because
Probably.
they didn't really fit
Yeah,
in either kingdom.
right.
And what happened to their tithe?
Yeah, because then did they have to tithe them anymore?
They did technically. It was a
But-
mess. You can read in Samuel where Eli
People were
is
taking parts of the tithes.
Eli's sons mess up badly and are killed by God because of it, but they're taking the extra stuff they shouldn't that is supposed to go to God, and they're not caring at all about the people.
And the king is taking stuff, so there are higher taxes being leveled, and then, or levied, and then eventually, I just realized the origin of the word levied is actually Levi, isn't it?
Yes.
So levying taxes is taking your tenth, right? That's awesome. I never made that connection before.
I didn't either.
So, yes, and then ultimately, right, if I am worshiping Baal up in the high places, I'm not going to give the priest of God my stuff. Why would I? So, yeah, it would be lean times. When the people aren't faithful, it's leaner times for the priest, for sure.
Well, the Levites, they were promised that, but
Yeah,
it didn't matter.
right. If I'm not following God, I'm not going to follow
Yeah.
the promise. Yeah. We see the same thing is true today, right? When you have leaner times or times where fewer people are faithful, you have leaner times among the priesthood. There are fewer contributions to the church. There are fewer people who want to serve as priests. When the faith of the people falters, the priesthood struggles.
You see it in your parishes. You have
Yes.
trouble making your
Yes.
budgets. You have
Yes.
trouble maintaining your property,
Yeah.
you know, and so you have to have special collections, and the faithful group gets smaller, so the burden is heavier on those of us who are trying to contribute. So.
Okay, so I don't get lost. The tribe of Judah and Benjamin were the north?
South.
They were the south, okay,
Yes.
and the other tribes were Israel.
Yes. So, we're going to look at one other thing here that I think, small passage, that I think highlights David's relationship to the priesthood a little bit, which is from 1 Chronicles 24, 1-3.
This one's easy to overlook. People don't talk about this very much, and it's kind of cool.
Say it again,
Say this again
First
now.
Chronicles.
1 Chronicles, chapter 24, verses 1-3.
First Chronicles
24.
24.
24, 1-3.
This would be an easy one to pass over. It doesn't
It
look
is.
like
It's
a
really
looks
easy
like
to
it's-
miss this.
snazzy verse.
Right, it looks like it's describing something that I can skip and get to the end.
Yeah.
And it starts like that. Right? The division of the sons of Aaron were these. Who are the sons of Aaron? Who's Aaron?
Moses' brother.
Moses' brother, and he is the first high priest, right? As Aaron being the head of the family, we missed the idea, but it's there. Aaron is the high priest. So then, sons of Aaron, the divisions are these. The sons of Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. But Hadab and Abihu died before their father and had no children. So Eleazar and Ithamar became the priests. With the help of Zadok of the sons of Eleazar and Ahimelech of the sons of Ithamar, David organized them according to the appointed duties in their service. Who's organizing the priesthood? David. David is acting, again, in the function of the high priest in terms of administrative authority over the priesthood. So, easy to miss, but we talked about it, but there's an example of where you can see from the Bible that David assumed administrative control over the priesthood for the kingship. Which makes it, if you think about it, with the benefit of hindsight, no surprise at all that the kingship didn't last. Because David did a lot of things right, but he overreached in terms of his religious authority. Which worked great for him because...
It's fine for him, he was holy.
Yeah, he was holy. And in fact, the priesthood probably ran better with David doing that than it would have with just the priests of his day doing it.
It only works if you have a holy king.
Yes, David set a bad precedent. Or an amazing precedent for us as Christians with a perfect king. But in the interim between David and Jesus...
Nobody else could do it.
Yeah, it is. So, did the priesthood change under David fundamentally in terms of its role and what it does? Religiously?
No.
No. Did it change practically and functionally?
Yeah.
Yes. So we still have basically just two priesthoods. There's this order of Melchizedek thing, and then there's the Levitical priesthood. Or people call it that. It's really Aaronic. It's not Levitical because Levites aren't priests.
But again, how did that affect the law, though?
Right. It led to widespread non-adherence to the law. Which is,
The law
again...
didn't change.
Yeah.
The law did not change because the priesthood did not
Yeah.
change.
The religious law did not change. Lots of new legal seeming
Civil laws.
administrative civil regulations came up as a result of the kingship.
So the law of the priesthood remained the same.
Yes, religious law did not change, which is why the kingship dissolved. God punished the people for not following the law. And said, your kingship's not working, your kingdom's not working, you don't get to do this.
Told you so.
Except it's already, the kingship, it's too late to go back. It's already been established as an eternal and perpetual thing through David. The same was the priesthood. So now these two things have to be able to coexist.
That's right. There is the eternal kingship that is very important, established with David.
Yep.
God says, I'm going to make you a house,
Yep.
and it'll last forever. It'll stand forever.
Probably jumping ahead, and if you just want to leave this question till later, but I won't remember. Herod, King Herod,
Yep.
and the high priest, and
Yep.
Caiaphas, and their power structure,
Yes.
and their ability for atonement.
Yep.
And of course, my little mind also thinking of the movies I'm seeing, which could be so wrong. But anyway, you know, how does that relate to what we're seeing here? And you can table that if you want.
So who do we have now? This is going to be fun in anticipating where we go. People with religious authority right now. We have three. We have priests, Levites, arguably four, king, and Melchizedek, who is some of those things, but he's sort of...
Because he's forever.
He's essentially all of those things. He may not be a Levite, but he is a priest and a king. He is sort of the archetype for how this is intended to be. And he shows how David could have done things. He is priest and king, but he is priest first and king second. And David was king first and priest second. And that didn't work as well. But it worked fine when you had the priest role primary. So he's kind of a thing that we will keep looking back at, but I'm not going to worry about him. So we've still got a lot of things left to find that are there by the time of Jesus. We've got scribes, and we've got Pharisees.
And Sadducees.
Yeah. and Sadducees,
Edomites, you might want to do some.
And where did all those guys fall in
and
under?
Essenes.
Were they,
And zealots.
this is in Christian times, right? You're
Yes.
talking about, they were, these people, these titles didn't exist.
Not yet, but we have a long way to go tomorrow.
Right, but I'm just saying that, you're just bringing that up this.
Check. This is our roadmap.
All
We've
right.
got,
Okay.
So we're in the New Testament where we're talking those terms.
we are winding down the Old Testament.
Okay.
To get to the New Testament, then we've got bishops and deacons
With Jesus first, yeah.
and apostles. So we've got a little bit of work to do tomorrow. This was laying foundations.
It's
And
sort
all-
of like the Ten Commandments getting turned into 600.
Yeah.
And
They
now
do.
we've got these labels of
Yeah,
getting turned into
right.
so many.
And it's a thing that happens, multiplication and division of a creed. We've seen it. How many Christian denominations are there? And different kinds of ministers, priests, and etc. It is a thing that happens. And I think it's a thing that we'll lose sight of how it happened and what it meant for the Jewish faith, but it did. So we will be tracing that through. So right now we have, where we're leaving off, we have the Levitical priesthood is operating and the kingship is there, but we've already talked about the kingdom is going to split. And what happens is, when it does, it eventually, the model of the kingship and the people existing is not sustainable. It doesn't work. And all of the people end up in exile. And so the Assyrians and then the Babylonians come in and they take people out of the Holy Land and into exile. And pretty much most of the formal practice of and infrastructure and structures and institutions pretty much dissolve in exile. And a lot of this is stopped. And where we pick back up tomorrow is the people come back from exile and rebuild these structures. And they look different when they get rebuilt. And from that, then, as is wont to happen if you're not careful, the priesthood is again corrupted and adjusting measures come into place and new things spring up. And when that happens, at the time of Jesus, you come in right smack in the middle of a power struggle between a lot of these groups, and you introduce Jesus into the middle of that, and he gets caught in the crossfire. And then from that emerges yet a new thing that is still another thing that draws from a lot of these different influences and goes through Jesus and leads to the priesthood that we have today. So that's tomorrow's journey. Another thing we're going to try to get to tomorrow, Tammy said last night when we were sitting around talking that one of the things she likes best about some of our studies, especially our Psalm study, is that it's easily connectable from a moral point of view and a how I live my life point of view. We're hoping also to end up with some of that, so it's not just, oh, I went and heard people talk abstractly about the priesthood for 4 hours, and there's no benefit for my life personally. It's not what we want our teaching to be. So we're going to somehow try to connect back to how we should behave as Christians to all of this as well. Because remember, we are all baptized into Jesus Christ, who is priest, prophet, and king. So in one sense, each and every one of us is a priest. But in another sense, none of us is a priest, and only the people who are ordained are. And hopefully understanding what that means that we have a share in Christ's priesthood will help us also understand how better to live our own lives as Christians.